I eased my key into the front door, the quiet click of the lock startling in the late afternoon hush. The September air still clung to me, warm, with a faint trace of summer that the coming dusk would soon steal away. I'd left the office earlier than usual, a rare indulgence after months of 12-hour days. My phone was still buzzing with emails, but the thought of a stolen hour with a cup of tea in my childhood home felt like a small rebellion. Except, I wasn't supposed to hear voices. I froze in the narrow hallway, the scent of lemon polish and old books wrapping around me like an old memory. From the living room came the muffled scrape of cardboard against hardwood, the rip of packing tape. My heart thudded. "She'll thank us later." My mother's voice floated out, gentle, almost cheerful. A deeper voice, Dad, answered. "It's just a tiny studio. Less to clean, easier for her. We're helping." Helping? I stepped closer, heels silent on the rug, and peeked through the doorway. There they were, my parents, sleeves rolled up, my life in neat piles. My framed college diploma leaned against a half-filled box. The cashmere sweater I'd saved 3 paychecks for was folded like it belonged to someone else. Heat rushed up my neck, equal parts shock and betrayal. This was my home. My things.
My story.
I tightened my grip on my leather bag, nails biting into the handle. Why are they doing this? The silk of my blouse suddenly felt like armor, soft, but holding me together. A single, jagged thought flashed through me. They weren't moving me with me. They were moving me out. I wasn't always this steady. 2 years ago, I was just a girl with an overstuffed backpack and a heart that pulsed with equal parts hope and dread. The memory begins in my parents' kitchen, a place that used to smell like cinnamon rolls and comfort. That evening it reeked of something bitter, like burnt coffee and old arguments. My father, Richard, stood at the head of the table, arms folded tight across his chest. My mother, Linda, busied herself with a dish towel she kept ringing like it owed her answers. "Claire," my father said, my name breaking like glass in his mouth. "You're 23. It's time to be realistic. This whole freelance design idea isn't a career. We've found a tiny studio apartment near downtown. Your mother and I are helping you move next week." Helping. The word sliced deeper than any outright insult. I gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles whitened. "You're packing my things without asking me?" My voice trembled, then steadied. "You don't get to decide where I live." Mother's eyes darted away, guilt flashing like a camera bulb. "We just want you to be safe. That big loft you rent with your friends, it's not secure." I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Safe? Or easier to control? I thought of all the late nights sketching designs, the clients who'd finally started emailing back, the first tiny checks I'd cashed with shaking hands. None of it mattered to them. To them, I was still the child who needed decisions made for her. My grandmother's voice floated from memory, soft but fierce. "Darling, you carry your own compass. Don't let anyone else steer you." Before she died, she had given me a silver pendant shaped like a small compass. I wore it beneath my blouse that night, its weight against my collarbone like a silent ally. I reached up, fingers pressing the pendant through the fabric. "I'm not moving," I said quietly. "And if you pack my things, I'll unpack them. Every single one." Father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The silence stretched, long enough for me to feel my own resolve harden. I grabbed my sketchbook from the counter, the paper warm where the sunlight had been. "I have work to finish." And I walked out. My legs were shaking, but each step felt like a small declaration. I will choose my own direction. When I left my parents' house that night, I didn't even have a real plan, just a single suitcase and the faint smell of my mom's lavender detergent clinging to my jacket. The bus station's fluorescent lights hummed overhead while I clutched the only thing that felt like an anchor, Aunt Lydia's silver bracelet, the one she'd pressed into my palm before she passed. She'd whispered, "Build the life you wish someone had built for me." For the first few months in Chicago, survival came first. I rented a cramped room above a bakery that started kneading dough at 3 a.m., so the warm, yeasty scent became my alarm clock.
I
Worked double shifts at a coffee shop, my hands perpetually smelling of espresso and bleach. At night, I'd sit cross-legged on the squeaky floor, scrolling through online courses in digital marketing. The world of algorithms and campaigns was a mystery, but also a quiet promise. One evening, after a 12-hour day of juggling lattes and mopping floors, I stumbled upon a free webinar hosted by Maya Brooks, a sharp, confident woman with a husky laugh and a resume that read like a masterclass in building brands. Something about the way she spoke, like she was handing out permission slips to dream big, made me lean closer to my laptop screen. I started sending her thoughtful questions after every session. At first, I doubted she'd notice. But a week later, an email popped up. "I like the way you think, Harper. Want to assist me on a freelance project?" My heart nearly gave out. Under Maya's mentorship, I learned how to turn numbers into stories, how a well-placed ad could shift an entire company's destiny. She never treated me like a charity case. She treated me like a colleague. When I confessed my background one late night over takeout, she simply smiled and said, "Your past isn't a scar, it's a strategy manual. You know exactly what you never want to be." Work consumed me, but it also healed me. I spent countless nights hunched over my secondhand laptop, the silver bracelet cool against my wrist as I typed proposals and crafted campaigns. The first time a client paid me more in a single month than I'd ever earned in a year at the coffee shop, I sat on the floor and cried, soft, relieved tears that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and victory. Over the next 3 years, my little freelance gig evolved into a boutique agency. Harper Lane Media, my name etched on the office door in crisp lettering. I rented a loft with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River, a place that reflected the woman I'd become. Sharp lines, open space, unapologetically mine. But when my parents called, I kept the details vague. "I'm keeping busy," I'd say, masking 7-figure contracts behind casual small talk. I wanted them to see my success when the moment was right. Not as a weapon, but as proof that I'd built something without their blueprint. The silver bracelet never left my wrist. Its quiet weight reminded me of Aunt Lydia's words, "Build the life you wish someone had built for me." Every click of its clasp felt like another brick in the fortress of my independence. I didn't expect the doorbell's chime to feel like thunder, but it did. The polished brass knob was cool beneath my palm as I opened the door to the very people who once believed I'd never make it without them. My mother stood first in line, gripping a thin cardigan at the elbows like she was bracing for a storm. My father loomed behind her, his jaw set hard, the faint smell of his cologne, oak and something bitter, floating in with the late afternoon air. My younger brother, Mark, shifted from foot to foot, eyes flicking everywhere but mine. "Can we come in?" my mother asked, her voice too sweet, as if we were strangers meeting for the first time. I stepped aside and let the silence guide them down the hall. Their shoes clicked against the hardwood floors I'd chosen myself, warm walnut with a satin finish. The late sun poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, igniting the copper streaks in the white oak shelves lined with art books and travel photographs. My mother paused beneath a framed photograph of a Moroccan souk I'd taken on my last trip. "You've been traveling," she said, her words careful, like stepping on glass. I caught her glance at the sculptural light fixture overhead, a cascade of blown glass orbs that glimmered like captured raindrops. She'd once told me that a woman like me shouldn't dream too big. It would only lead to disappointment. Emily, she still used the name as if it belonged to the girl who left 3 years ago. "Your landlord said this place must cost a fortune." "It does," I said lightly, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "But my landlord is very understanding." My father cleared his throat, his deep voice slicing through the air. "We came because, well, we heard you'd be needing help. We thought you were still in that tiny studio near campus. We were packing your things to make it easier for you." My chest tightened, not from pain, but from the memory of the night I left, clutching a single duffel bag and my grandmother's silver locket. They had called it a phase, my decision to start over without their plan for me. I gestured toward the sunlit living room. "Why don't you sit?" The cream-colored sectional welcomed them awkwardly. Mark's gaze wandered to the wall of awards and certificates. each encased in sleek black frames. A plaque with my name, Lila Morgan, etched in gold gleamed under the light. CEO and founder, Morgan Strategies, Forbes 30 under 30. He blinked. You're the Lila Morgan from the magazine cover? I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. Surprise. My mother clutched the edge of the couch cushion. But when you left, you barely had anything. We thought that I'd come crawling back? My voice stayed soft, but the edge was unmistakable. Her lips parted, searching for an answer. I walked toward the marble-topped console and lifted the silver locket that had never left my sight. Grandma always told me, the world will never hand you a chair. Build your own table. So I did. I let the locket fall against my collarbone and turned to face them fully. I own this apartment. I built the company you've probably read about in the business section. And that tiny studio? I bought the building it sits in. Your help isn't needed. My father's face slackened, the lines around his mouth deepening with something like regret. Mark rubbed his palms together, a nervous habit he'd never outgrown. Silence thickened, broken only by the faint hum of the city below. You left us in the dark, my mother whispered, her voice trembling now. I took a slow breath, letting the weight of the moment settle. No, I said gently. You turned off the light. I just learned to see without it. Their eyes held a mixture of shame and reluctant awe. For the first time in years, the room belonged entirely to me. I let the silence settle like a heavy velvet curtain. The living room, my living room, gleamed under the soft glow of the pendant lights. The hand-woven rug I'd splurged on last year seemed to anchor the entire scene, and for the first time I understood the power of owning your space. Mom sat on the edge of the gray sofa, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. Dad leaned against the doorway, arms crossed but eyes darting across the room. The framed architectural sketches, the subtle scent of peonies from the crystal vase, the quiet hum of the city night beyond my floor-to-ceiling windows. They were the same people who, not so long ago, had packed my things into cardboard boxes without a word of warning. I inhaled slowly, letting the memory sting just long enough to sharpen my voice. I know you thought you were helping, I began, my tone steady. But helping someone doesn't mean deciding their life for them. Mom's lips trembled. We only wanted you safe, Hannah. Safe. I almost smiled. Safety had cost me nights of ramen dinners, years of 12-hour shifts, and the constant hum of doubt, but it had also given me the life that surrounded us now. I'm not here to punish you, I continued, leaning forward, elbows on my knees. But if we're going to move forward, there are conditions. For all of us. Dad's brow furrowed. Conditions? Yes. I let the word land like a stone in water. First, you have to start trusting me, completely. No more surprise solutions. No more making decisions behind my back. I've proven I can build my own life. Mom nodded faintly, eyes glassy. Second, I said, softening just a fraction. You need to stop shrinking your own dreams. I watched you both give up so much to fit a picture of stability. If you want me to visit to stay close, then I need to see you living, not just existing. Take that trip to Yellowstone you keep postponing. Start the pottery class, Mom. Dad, dust off that guitar you keep in the attic. Dad's arms lowered a notch. Third, I added, our relationship has to be based on honesty.
If you're worried, say it. If you disagree, say it.
But don't pack boxes behind my back and call it love. The room grew still. For the first time in years, I saw not the parents who tried to control me, but two people who had been scared of losing me, of failing me, of life's unpredictable edges. Dad's shoulders slumped. We can do that. I can do that. Mom reached across the coffee table and covered my hand with hers. We only wanted you to be happy. But maybe we never asked what happiness meant to you. I squeezed her fingers gently. This, I said, glancing around the room that I'd built from long nights and quiet grit, is my happiness. And I want you both in it on these terms. The velvet silence shifted, lighter now. For the first time since I'd walked in and found them packing my things, I felt the power tilt, steadily, gracefully, back into my own hands. I stood on the balcony of my townhouse, the crisp autumn air brushing against my cheeks, carrying the scent of rain-soaked leaves. The city hummed below, soft traffic, a faint saxophone from a nearby cafe, the heartbeat of a life I had built on my own terms. Inside, the evening had settled into a quiet warmth. My parents had left hours ago, their faces a mixture of humility and a tentative hope I hadn't seen in years. For the first time, our goodbye wasn't heavy with unspoken accusations. It felt lighter. I glanced at the small wooden charm resting on the side table, the one Aunt Marianne had given me the night I left home. "When the world tries to shrink you," she'd said, pressing it into my palm, "let this remind you of your own shape." Back then, it was just a tiny carved feather. Now, it felt like a prophecy fulfilled. The past few days replayed in my mind like a film reel, the shock on my parents' faces when they stepped into my sunlit loft, the way my father's shoulders slumped when he finally whispered an apology, my mother's trembling hand as she touched the framed award on my wall. Those small moments, years in the making, were worth every sleepless night, every self-doubt I had fought. Tonight, I wasn't the angry daughter they once tried to pack into a life too small for her. I wasn't the timid young woman who left home with a duffel bag and a feather charm in her pocket. I was simply Harper Lane, a woman who had carved her own place in the world and, in doing so, had left enough space for forgiveness. As I sipped my cooling tea, a single thought settled in my chest like a quiet anthem. Strength isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were right to begin with. I ran my thumb over the smooth edge of the feather and smiled. The city lights flickered back at me, and for the first time in a long while, they didn't feel like distant stars. They felt like home.